Welcome. I'm Mike Chastain, Children's Director here at Victory Church, and I'd love to invite you to like and subscribe below so that you never miss any content that we post here on the YouTube channel. And without further ado, the message you actually came here to see.
And Ariel, if you don't know Ariel, no, I'm not going to highlight you too much because she hates the attention. But for those of you who've been here who know her, she was our worship director for about 4 years, 4 years. And she moved to Houston, and she's doing well there, but we're super, and you can catch up with her. She wants to talk to everybody, right? After the service, you hear all of her story. No, but she doesn't like the spotlight, so, but she's doing well there, but we're just so happy that we're still kind of home. And so I pray that for all of you attending here today, if you don't feel like, if you're looking for a place that's home, that you can find home here. And so I really pray for that for you today. And so when we were actually putting together, we're talking through songs to put together for the service, and she suggested Rest on Us. And I was like, yeah, I didn't realize that was like one of my favorites. And then we started singing it again this morning. And I'm just kind of reminded that for me, and then maybe for you, but for me anyway, there's a lot of anxiety in what I do, in what you have to going on in your life. And anytime on a Sunday morning, there's anxiety for me and for maybe the people up here, because you're kind of in the spotlight. You want to make sure that what you're saying is spot on and this and that. You want those things. And you're sometimes worried that it's going to fall apart. And so I personally need words like that. Lord, rest on us because we need you. I need you right now. And then there's something my dad used to say, and we're actually going to get to a topic that he was pretty passionate about in his ministry. But anytime it came to anything with his people, he's like, if you've experienced the blessing yourself, isn't that what you want for then your people that you're serving? So if I'm going through anxiety, and I know a lot of you look at me and go, oh, he's the pastor, he's pretty even keel, and so the idea of me dealing with that is really foreign to you. And it's like, no, it exists. And so if it can hold me together, God's presence holds me together, it can hold all of us together. And so that's why I love singing songs like that just remind us as a community, God's going to show up today. We sang a song earlier about how God does great things. And a lot of times we think, oh, it just happens here. No, he does great things every single day, every single moment. So he's going to do something great today. And we lose sight of that, of all the great things that God does. It's one of the reasons why we come together every week, because we forget. So we got to come together every week to be reminded of what God is doing. And so today, one thing God has not done yet is cleared up my sinuses. Mrs. Martin, Karen, she prayed for me, followed before the 8 o'clock service, and she commanded. She's like, be cleared now. Use the word now. In the name of Jesus, now be cleared. She said that, but then I still can't breathe. And then she looked at me and she said, oh, you're too strong of a Christian. I'm like, okay, that blew it out. So if her prayer, God comes to fruition, if anybody has Kleenex, man, just be on the ready for me, because it might all just get dumped out right now. But when we talk about the great things that God has done, it really applies to what we're talking about today, in the sense of the last few weeks, we've been doing a series called Ungrateful. And we've been focusing on these times when it's very hard. You're going through whatever it may be, where life is just simply hard. Last week we talked about Job, where it was like a lot of it happened all at once. How do we be grateful during those times? Because oftentimes we associate gratefulness, we associate blessing with having. Whatever it is that we have, that I have this and this and this and this, and therefore that person must be blessed. And we focus then on what we don't have instead of focusing on what we actually do have. And then there's this unhealthy relationship that we have with things. And there's something that plagues all of us. That it's hard to be grateful when bad things are happening, but I've also found that it's hard to be grateful even when we have a lot. And we forget how much we have. And we forget all that God has actually given us. And so today we're going to talk about that. And it was interesting. I know some of you paid a lot of attention to the election, and we did at home just to kind of see what was going on, what's happening. And there's one incident, and Amber and I talked about this, where it didn't really matter. By the way, this is not a party thing. It was just an event that happened, and we witnessed it, and it was the Al Smith dinner. How many of you remember? Did you guys watch any pieces of that? The Al Smith Foundation is a foundation in New York City that states it's a foundation dinner, and this is from their website. Since its first dinner in 1946, the Alfred E. Smith Memorial Foundation dinner has raised millions of dollars for New York's most vulnerable women and children. Very worthy cause. The dinner has featured renowned cultural, business, and political figures, including most majority party presidential nominees during the election year since 1960. That's why it was a big deal this year. And when you watch that, you look in the room, and what you see is people that represent billions of dollars. There were billionaires in that room. There were millionaires in that room. There were no thousandaires in that room. And we're looking at a couple hundred people, at least 200 to 300, maybe 400 people having this dinner. And they got up there. They even had a famous comedian, Jim Gaffigan, was their MC. So this is a big deal. And they kept, every other moment or so, they would start patting themselves back on how much money they'd raised for this charity. And if you go online right now, this is what it says. It says, Alfred E. Smith raised a record nearly $10 million. 8.9, actually. And that's a lot of money. But it wasn't a lot of money to the people sitting in the room. One guy in there, we know, you Google him, it's well known, over $100 million. $100 billion in net worth. $5 billion, multiple billionaires. Mayor of this town, this say $20 billion. You can catch all this stuff as public record. And they're sitting back how great they were for how much they raised. It's like they're solving the world's problems. Now, I looked at that, and 8.9 billion is less than a 1% of $1 billion. Less than a percentage point of all their affluence to give. And that can be kind of upsetting. You know, it's easy for me to judge that and go, I don't know how they, honestly, I don't know how they spend their other money. And you may look at people who are wealthy and go, well, sure, judge them because they can solve a lot of problems. But then when you actually look at the other numbers and you look at the Christian community. Now, Christian community, we're taught to give. We're taught to be generous. We're taught that God does great things. And he does all these things in our midst. A fundraiser by the name of Richard Garnett. He's a fundraising consultant. His job is to help not-for-profits out how to get money out of people for their programs. And he is also a wonderful Christian man. He discovered that Christians in the Western world, which is about 20% of Christians all over the world, Western world, Europe, United States, Canada, those places, give away 2.5% of our income. It's not much better. Not much better. Especially when we understand that in the Bible, God tells us to, he says, how you take care of the world is through your generosity. First thing you do is you give to the temple, you give in worship, you give to your church. They say 10% off the top. And we go, 10%. But it's a sliding scale. It's not like how much and this and that. It's a sliding scale, 10% of whatever, right? Whatever it is. I hate it, by the way. Don't ask me later, before or after taxes. I will tell you before taxes, okay? You're like, oh my gosh, because that's not a good heart right there when you're asking how much little can I give and get away with it. But then also in the Old Testament, God has a wonderful heart for the poor. Ideally, he looks at, there's 3 different groups of people that he wants to take care of. And that's through the widows, it says. Widows, orphans, and the foreigners, or the aliens who are living amongst you, not outer space aliens, but people who are not of your community. People who don't necessarily have a way to take care of themselves because they've been left alone in the world. So this is how you're going to do it. He said, this is how you're going to do it. First, you're going to want to give to your church. You're going to give to the temple. And then when it comes time to your field and when you're harvesting, when you harvest your field, just go through it one time and you'll have enough. You'll have enough for your life when you just go through that one time. It's like 90% of your income is actually a lot to live on. It's a lot to live on, 90%. It says the rest of it, go to the edge of the field. Leave the edge of the field just kind of there for people who are poor, could come through and get what they need to live. Don't go through a second time to make sure you get all the little pieces, to get all the change, to get all the stuff out. Just leave it there. Leave it for people, because God's got a heart for people who don't have. And then sometimes, we may say, well, that's great for somebody else. The landowners, the wealthy, that's great for other people, but it's expensive to live in California. It is. It's expensive to live in California. But so's your garage full of crap. Right? All the stuff that we have. And to make it a little bit more uncomfortable right now, the same guy who did the statistics on 2.5% of Christians, that's what 2.5 our income, he did a little bit deeper dive and then realized that to be considered in the top 1%, it's like the food pyramid of the world when it comes to money, the top 1%, to qualify for that spot requires you to make $30,000 a year. For most people, not everybody, but for most people in this room, you're in that spot. Now, yes, I know, California is an expensive place to live. Get it. But our life and the vibrancy of our life does not depend on money. It depends on God. And here we are, so many of us, very anxious about having enough. Again, my dad, I told you, he talked about this subject and about giving, and he knew freedom of things. Like I talked to one of our members this morning after 8 o'clock. He said, you know what? Every time I give something away, I feel better. I feel free. Every time I get rid of something, every time I give something away, I feel freer. And pastors, historically, have a hard time talking about money, some of them. And my dad was speaking at a conference of pastors, and they're like, here, you go talk about money, because none of us want to. You go talk about it. And my dad shot back at him and said, do you know the joy of giving, of tithing? Well, yeah. Then why don't you want it for your people? They may get mad at you initially, but don't give up to that. We're going to talk about that again a little bit different. But what's revealed is that we have this upside down relationship with money and material possessions, where the only thing that matters is what flows to you, not through you. We worry about what we earned. We worry about what you're owed. We worry about what you possess. I remember a student many years ago would get mad when I talked about giving. He said, but I earned that money. I made that money. That was my time. That's what I did. I made that happen. God says, hey, rain falls on the wicked, rain falls on the righteous. I give to anybody. But it's not about what flows to you. It's about what flows through you. Because if it's about what flows to you and it stops at about you consuming, it's like stagnant water that's poisonous to you. Stagnant water, water that just stands there. You know that's where the mosquitoes come, flies that come. It's a stagnant water. It brings death. Flowing water, though, is fresh. It gives life. And so we have to treat not just our love, but everything that is us in this kind of fashion, to be able to give anything. And the key to unlocking it is generosity. So if you're anxious about money, if you're anxious about things, if you're thinking, will I ever have enough? The key to be free is generosity. When Jesus, he addresses this reality that plagues so many people more than any other subject that he talks about in the Bible. He talks about money. And then in Luke chapter 12, and I want you to turn your Bible. If you brought your Bible or a Bible app with you, because the words aren't going to be on the screen. We're going to skip that whole reading part, so don't worry about it. Because we're going to get it right now and how we read it together. So Luke chapter 12, and I'm going to be reading from a translation called God's Word translation. But if you don't have that, just simply follow along. And we have this incident where Jesus is, again, talking to the crowds like he does so often. And he says this. He says, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to give me my share of the inheritance that our father left us." I don't want to ask for a show of hands, but how many people have fought over your parents' possessions? Happens a lot. Being in my position, having to do memorials and funerals and of that such, I have had to deal with a lot of families that it just destroys them, dividing up the inheritance. And now there were laws to it back then. This is how much the oldest would get, and this is how much good. So tell my brother to divide the inheritance up with me. Because again, here's this moment. I'm not getting what I'm owed. I didn't earn any of it. It didn't anything, but I'm owed this. Tell him to give it to me. And then Jesus, in response to him, he said to him, "Who appointed me to judge or to divide your inheritance?" He's mad. He's like, are you serious? We're talking about all these things, and you're asking me, you're taking up my time to tell your brother to give him your money and your pettiness over this stuff. Well, since you're going to bring up the subject, let's talk about it a little bit bigger, about our relationship with material things. He says, "Be careful to guard yourselves from every kind of greed. Life is not about having a lot of material possessions." Then he used this illustration. He said, a rich man had land that produced good crops. He thought, well, what should I do? I don't have enough room to store my crops. He said, I know what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones so that I can store all my grain and goods in them. Then I'll say to myself, you've stored up a lot of good things for years to come. Take life easy, eat, drink, and enjoy yourself. What is that right there? I'm looking for one word. What is that? Retirement. Retirement. That's retirement. Look at all we've done. Look at all we've saved. Now it's time to close the books and enjoy life, eat, drink, be merry, and just enjoy yourself. Take life easy. And I don't want to get a show of hands, but how many is the goal of life? Retirement. We look forward to it. I'm looking by our retired people over here. 8 o'clock was really uncomfortable, by the way. Anyways, the amount of retired people, that's what we're looking forward to. When I don't have to work and I can just, God, I've just been blessed. Ugh. And then what did he do when he got more? He upgraded. How many times do we get lost in the whole upgrading? We got to upgrade everything all the time. It's just getting more and more and more and more and more. Amber and I are watching a series on Netflix, right? What was it called? Do you remember? Something about trash. Something about garbage and like what happens to your phones and computers and all this non-recyclable waste. And we're turning into the world from Wall-E. Around the world. We throw it away, they ship it overseas. And it's all because we gotta upgrade all the time. We're always thinking about upgrading. This is a trap that we fall into. And then God said to him, okay, you think that this is the goal of life, to take life easy, to eat, drink, and enjoy yourself, to take all that you've been given by God, because it's the crops. You roll the dice. You don't know if you're a farmer. It could be a good year, it could be a bad year. It all depends on the weather. So much of life, so much of life is made through connections. Your job is made through different things that God has a hand in. And he says to him, but God said to this man, you fool, I will demand your life from you tonight. Now who will get what you've accumulated? That's how it is when a person has material riches, but is not rich in his relationship with God, or rich towards God. Material riches, but not rich in relationship with God. And this would be a point where a lot of pastors would stop and let's talk about the story some more. The good news is that if you just keep reading, Jesus talks about the story. So we're going to let him talk. It says that Jesus said to his disciples, so I tell you, stop worrying about what you will eat or wear. Life is more than food. The body is more than clothes. Consider the crows. They don't plant or harvest. They don't even have a storeroom or a barn. Yet God feeds them. You are much more than birds. You're worth much more than birds. Can any of you add an hour to your life by worrying? If you can't do a small thing like that, why worry about other things? Consider how the flowers grow. They never work or spin yarn for clothes. But I say that not even Solomon in all his majesty was dressed like one of these. That's the way God clothes the grass in the field. Today it's alive, tomorrow it's thrown into the incinerator. How much more will he clothe you people who have so little faith? Take a moment and pause. Who's saying these words? Who? Who? Jesus. Jesus is saying these words. Who's king of the universe? Jesus. Who knows how everything works? Who? So when he says, you're going to be taken care of, do you think he's just saying moral statements, how to be a generous person? No, I'm going to take care of you. I know the plans. So stop worrying about it. Because all this stuff you worry about is going to end up at the dump someday. Jerry Seinfeld has a funny bit where he calls our homes are all garbage processing centers. We buy things and slowly crapify them over time. We take the new TV, we take whatever the new Christmas gifts that you have, and we put them on display, we do the instructions, and then year, 2 years down the line, they go to the closet, they go in a drawer, they go in a cabinet, and then they go to the garage. Because someday we might need it again. Nothing makes it out of the garage. Nothing makes it out of the garage except maybe your Christmas decorations. But nothing makes it out. And then once it gets out of there, we send it to garbage prison or storage facility where we go and visit it. We'll be there someday. We're trying to make room for you, and you close the prison door on it again. That's what we do. This is what all the stuff is. It's all future garbage. We need to see our things for really what they are. And he goes on, he says, don't concern yourself about what you'll eat or drink. Quit worrying about these things. Everyone in the world is concerned about these things, but your Father knows you need them. Who knows you need them? Father. Your Father knows what you need. Right now, in this moment, he knows what you need. He knows what you need. He says, rather be concerned about his kingdom. He says, then these things will be provided for you. Prioritize God first, give first, be generous first. Then these things will be provided for you. Again, I'm not saying you're going to be plowed under a mountain of material blessings. That's not the point. He's not saying, I'm going to keep dumping on you material blessings. But you'll figure out what's important, what you can live on, what you can't live on, and then be able to get rid of, and to be able to do things with other things. He says, then these things will be given to you. He says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, little flock, he says. Don't be afraid, little flock. I got you. I got you. I got you. Don't be scared over there. We got it right here. I'm paying attention. I know your anxiety. I know your worry. Don't worry. Food's right around the corner. We got to make it through there. Don't worry. I got you. And then Paul says this. And Paul said this. And I love when Paul writes this. Because he says, he, God, the Father, who gave us his Son, who gave his Son for us to die for us, your prized possession, your children, the only born, your child, if he gave up the only child, the firstborn, how many of you are firstborn in your family? Prized possessions right there. You know, I laugh because in our family, the prized possession, Noah, he's king, right? In my in-laws' eyes, they just start laughing at 8 o'clock service. They're like, yep, that's him. They know it. It's like, oh, him. Noah, they love you too, Isaiah. Thirdborn. All right. But they gave up the firstborn. Thirdborn too. Okay, thirdborn. Gave us the firstborn. If he gave up his child, why wouldn't he give you everything else? Because we go, well, that's great. You know, he died for my sins. That's great that he died for you, but he secured you a future that he will take care of you all the way until the end and through. So he says this, your Father is pleased to give you the kingdom. Not what we think of as a kingdom, but the kingdom that has no compare, that none of us have ever seen before and have no idea what it looks like. That's what our future is. And so he says this, sell your material possessions, give the money to the poor. Make yourselves wallets that don't wear out. Make a treasure for yourselves in heaven that never loses its value. In heaven, thieves and moths can't get close enough to destroy your treasure. Your heart will be where your treasure is. You know, what does it look like then to be rich towards God? It's not just, okay, offering time and we got to do that. It's just simply put, be prepared to share everything. Everything. Material goods, your talent, your knowledge, your good vibes, whatever it is, be prepared to share it. Because God gave it to you. It's never just for you. God gave it to you to share with someone else. And this is what generosity looks like. Generosity flows from God to you, to others, from others back to you, back to God. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It just flows. It flows. Nothing, you don't have to worry about tomorrow. It just keeps flowing. Everything. And just having that idea of relationship with material things can change your life. Because being rich can restore the vibrancy of your life. If you're always worried about having enough and you're working so hard to have, you're always going to be filled with anxiety. There's never enough. And God's saying, well, let's get rid of that. Let's take away the mundane and bring vibrancy back to really enjoy your life in the worlds around you. Obviously, I have a connection to church because I can see the benefits of working in church. People start giving. I get that. But I tell you, it brings vibrancy to a church, to a group of people. My church, my dad's church in Oklahoma. Again, he talked about this subject. And I'm not going to get into my dad's whole story, just to understand that he served in a church in rural Oklahoma. And if you've ever been part of a rural church, you know there's always the conversations, it feels like every other week, of whether they're going to close their doors or not. Just because they're not in big communities, they're not necessarily going to grow. They're just kind of getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and they get desperate, and finding a pastor to be there every week is hard, all that stuff. And then there's this little church in Oklahoma, and it's not because they're all poor. Some places, communities are poor, others are not so much. In my dad's community in Oklahoma, where he got sent to there, it was a county of 6,000 people. Okay, the only industry in town was two industries. They had the cattle ranching, which is pretty lucrative, cattle ranching, and the state prison. Those are the two industries in town. And he got sent there, and there was this dying little church. We're honestly having the discussion of, do we close our doors or not? Because we can't get steady leadership. It's just, we're going to close our doors. And then somebody approached him and said, hey, would you take an old guy who's in pastor school right now? And seminary. But if you don't know what that is, pastor school. And yeah, sure, we'll try that. So they sent my dad, 69 years old. Okay, he's now like 12th career on this thing. 69 years old, and he goes there, and I remember one of the leaders said, Lord, what have we done? All right, you've done this, because he removed the excuse of, I'm too old for this. So all you volunteers who think you're too old to volunteer, are you going to start a new job at 69? No, you're fine. You can do the work. He got there and just preached giving. That's all I did. So and then what happened over the 10 years that he served there was it turned into what I was told. I told the president there, I said, when my dad retired and they're looking for a new pastor, I said, man, this church is a great church. We can learn so much from this place because one of the things that happened was that they paid their staff. I mean, part of giving isn't just like pay me. It was just fair. My dad was like, just pay me a fair wage for what pastors should be paid in this area for this size of a church. So we'll do that. They got that done. They started paying our staff, but then it just snowballed into this church that had no impact on the community, but because they also turned into this vibrantly giving church that they all of a sudden were doing community projects. They built a playground for the community on their property. For the community, they would do all these other events and raise money for this and this and that. And they'd send money to missionaries and send money to pastoral students, all the guys who are going to be pastors someday. They started spending, and they started having a global impact, all this little county of 6,000 people. And they were vibrant. And they're just like an old rural church, but they had a vibrancy about them that was amazing. And God did that because generosity flows from God to you, to others, and from others to you, and back to God. No stagnant water here. Once it becomes stagnant, you're going to close your doors. But it goes beyond just church. That's obvious for me, because I think, man, Victory is already an incredible place. I love this place. But we all deal with this stuff, and what even happens? And again, it's like, how do we, we did 179 shoeboxes this year, which is phenomenal. Can we do 300? Can we do more? Can we do things? Because you can do so much together as community and helping each other and seeing each other and witnessing each other. And they're excited about their church. And their church in the county of 6,000 grew. Not at like historical rates, but at a rural town to have a growing church, even 2 a year, is amazing. It was growing there because the people there knew church was important, that God was important in their lives, because you put your money where your mouth is, where your heart is, and then it's important. But it goes beyond just church of being to say, hey, let's bring your stuff in. It brings vibrancy to your life, too, not just to your church, because the church is made up of people, so it means it's going to be a vibrancy in you. And a vibrancy in you, it just changes your life. You know, I met my first financial advisor when I was fresh out of school. A man by the name of Daryl Scheidler. He's a member of our church, and he did well in an insurance company, and he continues to do well in wealth management. But he came to me, and you'll find out later, I found out with the experience of a lot of financial advisors, they look at you as a way to help increase their portfolio. If they work with you, they're always going to get a cut off of whatever your growth is. And so they'll just keep selling you and selling you and selling you. And Daryl just pulled me aside and just said, hey, buddy, you're going to have to pay taxes this year. What? I've never paid taxes before. I'd always done 1040 EZ. And now I've got to do something else? He said, this is how we're going to get you set up so you don't fall behind. And I'm like, he said, while we're at it, not a sales pitch, but he said, you're type 1 diabetic, meaning it's going to be harder. The farther you go along, it's going to be harder for you to get life insurance, to qualify for certain things, so we need to take care of this stuff now. And then Amber and I know she's heard him speak at conferences with other financial advisors, and his key go-to phrase was, if you're no life insurance, you've heard the word premium, you know, you pay premiums for stuff. He's like, make sure your clients are insurance rich but not premium poor. And he's like all about service. How do I take my job and my work to make your life better? That's how he approached his work. And to me, no wonder God used him and grew him, because he wanted to help other people. And that's his whole attitude towards the business, was helping other people. And he's generous with his finances, generous with his time and his wisdom. A great friend that I trusted. And it's hard to find. But generosity flows from God to you, to others, from you, others to you, and back to God. And then lastly, almost, one of our members here, she hates the spotlight, and so I won't tell her name. You may be able to figure out, but she's so passionate about giving that she doesn't want to retire. She could retire. She could go into her hobbies and do all the stuff and enjoy the rest of her life, because if she retires, then she needs money to give away. Her job is okay, but she's like, I don't want to retire because I give to my church. But I give shoe boxes. I give to here. 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 To here. Oh, you need something? If I could you shoot a little bit over here? Yep. Checkbook out. Gone. She wants to just continue to work, to continue to give away. And actually, following the 8 o'clock service, she said, you know, there's a difference between tithes and offerings. I'm like, yes, okay, I got it. Tithe is what you give first. Offering is what you do extra. Tithe is to your church. Offering is what you do to anybody and everybody else all over the planet. But you give to your church first. And she's so joyful about it. Supporting things like Knights in Shining Armor that goes to our students here, in tuition assist in their families, Operation Christmas Child, sending teams to the National Youth Gathering, mission work, helping people with education, all sorts of things. And it's all done. It's just such a joy and vibrancy to life to be able to put your money someplace and see it happen and see it work. Solomon wrote this about the rich fool. Rich fool, Jesus kind of actually writes this. Solomon was watching the world in the book of Ecclesiastes, and he had a great vantage point, just what he saw in the world and happening around him. He said, man, there's all these people who work so hard to make their big bank account only to die and leave it to morons, to leave it to idiots, people who don't respect the money, don't respect this and that, who don't know what it means, who's like the guy in this story who said, tell my brother to give me my part of the inheritance because I'm owed, because I need to go buy this or buy that. He's like, man, take your money, and instead of leaving that away, you can do whatever you want, but you don't owe your kids anything, because who's got their future in mind? Who? God. Jesus made a promise. I've got everybody covered. I got them all covered. Not your responsibility. If you want to as a gift, that's great. But if they're a moron, what are you doing? That's on you. Then who's the moron? Right? You're a moron for giving the kid a moron. Moron. All right, I'm embarrassing my wife right now. Okay. All right. Idiot. All right, how's a better word? Idiot. All right, you're an idiot. Who's the idiot? But give it away. Give it away. And that's okay because you get to see what's happening. And generosity flows from God to you, to others, from others to you. So basically in the morning when you wake up, be ready to share everything. Everything. If it's a huge breakfast burrito that you know is not good for you, share it. Rich fool would have eaten the whole thing. Share it. Be ready to share. Be ready to share it. If you're constantly looking for an upgrade, stop. What's that upgrade going to actually get you? Is it going to bring you joy? Maybe for a moment, but is it going to add another payment? Yes. Stop. Joy it will not be there. Learn to be content with what you have. Remember, God said, it doesn't mean you can't go out and get things, good things won't come, and the material things will come, but just don't be tied to them. Because remember, they are just in the early state of what? Garbage. Just early state of garbage. And then giving, and then think about what are your truly most cherished possessions. And maybe it's me, because I'm a sentimental person. So I value things that are given to me by people who love me and back and forth. Giving to people and being given things is amazing because of the love. When it's just me buying stuff, it's loving of me, and that's very unsatisfying. But I treasure the things that people give me and what I give because of the love that's there. So generosity, again, flows from the love of God to others, to you, to others, and from others to you and back to God. Can we say that together now? See if we get it together. Generosity flows from God to you, to others, and from others to you and back to God. And be grateful in everything. Be grateful for everything.